Hi, everyone. Happy 2026. Welcome to the new year. I wish you all the best for the new year. And this is my first reading for this new year. It took off about 3 weeks, but I want to thank you to all who have been following the readings of my book, The End of November, Growing Up with Domestic Violence. This is my memoir that I wrote about events in my life growing up with domestic violence. And eventually, I lost my mother to domestic violence. But it was important for me to write this book in order to help other survivors, other people who are finding it difficult to get out of these situations, and also to help abusers to stop abusing, and for parents to become aware of what their children go through witnessing the domestic violence. Children are the most silent of the victims of domestic violence. They don't talk about what they see, but it is molding them into the persons that they are growing into. And it's a dysfunctional thing that molds young people dysfunctionally, and we want to put an end to that by raising awareness. And that's what I try to do as an advocate for domestic violence awareness. And I started a nonprofit organization in my mother's name called the Heather Hurley Foundation for the prevention of domestic violence. And as we enter 2026, I pray that more awareness is made. We end domestic violence in every way possible, because I do not believe that a civilized society should have any type of abuse or violence, domestic violence within it. Okay? And so please follow along with me as I'm up to chapter 17. It is entitled Transitioning. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. Please share with others, because it will help many people. Okay? Chapter 17, Transitioning. Although times were rough, I felt so fortunate to be able to bypass placement in a strange temporary home by the flawed child welfare system. I thanked God for allowing my brother, sister, and I to be able to stay together as a family, a broken family, but a family nonetheless. My grandmother's house was nice and roomy, but her neighborhood was failing sharply because of a fairly new phenomenon that I called the age of the crackhead. All of a sudden, the sidewalks were covered in clear crack vials with red, yellow, and blue tops mixed in. When I walked to high school, not a day passed that I didn't crunch on some vial, even though I tried my best to avoid them. It was much worse in front of the school. It was as if crack elves showed up in the middle of the night with sacks of empty vials and just poured them all around the school grounds. And some kids started turning this into a game. Crunching crack vials um, became a sport. My grandma had an amazing green thumb. She created an oasis among the bricks of Brownsville, Brooklyn, a fertile garden in the backyard where she grew tomatoes and string beans and peppermint and squash and other things. The grass was lush and overlapping like waves in the sea. She had a beautiful rose bush in the back of the garden, and its soft white blossoms blew all over my grandmother's green grass. It was better than a painting. The neighbors next door had a cherry tree that blew pink blossoms over as well. And when they blew, they scented the air with the most perfect perfume imaginable. The owners of the tree welcomed the children in the neighborhood to pick as many cherries as they liked every spring. They grew till they were full and round and sweet, all without artificial assistance from toxic chemicals. My grandma had potted plants in the shape of swans on her back porch and hanging on the front porch. They added more character to the house that already had it in abundance. And not too long after we moved in, she had to bring the remaining ones inside the house because crackheads would steal them during the night. Apparently, they watched when my siblings and I moved in and took advantage of that. One night, they snuck into the front gate and broke the lock on my grandmother's garage. And we had a huge TV box filled with all of our toys, including our dolls, the Barbie ice cream shop, cars, and other Barbie playthings, our bikes, my Mario Cement Factory video game, our chemistry set, a guitar, and a Casio that I used to create theme music for the little films I made with my sister. There were some toys that I kept for at least a decade, and now they were all gone. It's a good thing I didn't want to part with my Mickey Mouse that I had since I was 5 years old. It was a gift my mother gave me when she took me to Walt Disney World in Florida to get away from my father for a minute. We stayed with my grandmother. We stayed with my godmother there in Florida. And I remember her urging my mom to make a new life there in Florida, away from my father. But my mom didn't. The Mickey was tattered, but I slept with it every night. I imagined hugging mommy when I hugged it in bed. Anyway, the crackheads stole everything. They did not leave a thing behind. My sister and I were beyond angry. We felt as though the whole world was out to get us. That's what it felt like. Just a year after we moved to our grandmother's house, one morning on the way to school, just about 2 blocks away, I noticed a disheveled looking man watching me from a distance as he walked in the same direction as me, crossing Linden Boulevard. It was a challenge trying to cross the boulevard as cars and trucks sped down the 6-lane highway in both directions. The island platforms were so skinny that I don't think they were meant for pedestrians to stand on. Anyway, I concentrated on crossing, not the man. Halfway down the lonely block, the man rushed up on me and put me in a headlock and dragged me into someone's driveway. He demanded that I give him money. I was a 17-year-old with a bus pass. Trembling, I told him I didn't have any. He then grabbed my hands and took my gold ring with my initial on it and my sister's ring that I borrowed just for that day. Our parents bought these for us from Panama. He also took my tiny gold earrings. He then proceeded to examine the plastic beaded Rastafarian necklace on me that my aunt Abigail gave me. I felt so violated. He decided not to take it. I guess it was too cheap for his taste. Then he started looking around behind him and then further back behind the driveway we were in. Something told me he was going to drag me behind there and do who knows what to me. I started screaming at the top of my lungs for God. I actually screamed, "Jehovah, help me, Jehovah." He yelled at me with his scary voice to shut up. I didn't care. I just continued to yell louder than him, "Jehovah." Then he screamed, "If you don't shut up, I'm going to shoot you." I didn't see a gun on him, but the mere thought of him shooting me after I escaped my own father shooting me scared the hell out of me. I shut up instantly. At that very moment, a man pulled up in a car, staring down the driveway. My assailant walked away as cool as a cucumber, back towards Linden Boulevard. I started crying hysterically as I walked back out onto the sidewalk. The man in the car stepped out and asked me if I knew that man. I was appalled, and it was apparent by the way I said, "No, he just robbed me." "Are you okay?" the man asked. Seeing that I was still alive and not sexually violated, I said yes. Then the man said something that I will never forget, something that brings me comfort when I feel like I'm alone, even down to this day. He said, "Something told me to come home, to come back home." This man owned the very house whose driveway the thief dragged me down. His street was a one-way street spilling in from Linden Boulevard, which is a huge highway that stretches for miles, a major intersection that connects Kings Highway and Remsen Avenue and Church Avenue, and Linden Boulevard is right around the block. So it would have taken him a lot for him to go around and enter his street back again. But he followed that voice, and I'm so glad he did. He offered to take me to look for this guy, but I just asked him to take me home, and he did. I thanked him. Later, the police officers drove me around to see if I would spot my assailant, but to no avail. After the incident, I was completely afraid to simply walk down the street in that neighborhood. I comforted myself with the thought that he was killed in some alley somewhere. It felt like someone looked at my siblings and I and said, let's take everything they have just for fun. I had a lot of anger inside, but none was directed toward God, as some have the custom. I thanked God for saving my life again that day. I thanked him for everything, including the hand-me-down clothes I received, which replaced my own clothes after they could no longer fit me. I didn't grow out of my clothes. I lost weight rapidly, so much so that they engulfed me. Natalie and I wasted away for months after Mom died. It was as though we were terminally ill patients on our last leg. Everything my 8-year-old sister ate, she vomited. I apologize for the grittiness, but my experience is real, and this is the best way that I can express myself. Everything I ate came out as diarrhea every day. I was naturally thin, but at this point, I was unhealthy looking. In high school, my new nickname was Stick. More important than looks, all three of us really were unhealthy. We developed anemia. This made us more susceptible to diseases that normal immune systems would fight off. I started developing allergies to airborne allergens, which culminated into me becoming an asthmatic. Every year to this day, it seems to get worse, and now I'm dependent on medication that I must take every day. And when I wrote this, that was the case, but now that's not the case. The asthma is under control, thank God. The stress of losing both our parents the way we did so suddenly was too much for our bodies to handle. I basically wanted to die, and I continued to entertain the thoughts of committing suicide a lot. Therapy was one of the best things our grandmother supplied for us. Each of us had our own therapist, and it really made a difference for our psychological well-being. The therapist never had to deal with children orphaned by domestic violence before, so we were a good case study for them. More than that, we began to feel that they genuinely cared for us. They walked us through, among other things, the court process. A preliminary hearing was set by the district attorney's office to determine if the case was serious enough to go to trial. Of course, the case was serious enough for prosecution. This process was mandatory. The DA and the court appointed child psychologists, not to be confused with the ones I just mentioned, prepped me for the questions that I would be asked as I was on the stand. I remember walking into a drearily lit courtroom through a side door. I guess that was the door underage witnesses entered from. 40 some odd faces looked annoyed at having to trek to court for jury duty. They stared at me as I climbed up the steps to the chair next to the judge. I was basically swimming in a black sweater with burgundy roses printed all over it. It was more like a sweater dress, as it easily reached my knobby knees through my jeans. Over and over again, I kept pulling it up at the neck, adjusting it to fit so that it wouldn't fall around my shoulders. Although I was prepared, I was terrified. I was asked questions about the happenings of that night many times in front of a few people at a time, but never a whole room of almost 50 people. The questions started okay. What is your name? I answered. Nicole Richards at the time. Good. One question out of the way, I thought. How old are you? 15. Two questions. The easy questions kept coming until the DA requested, please tell the court what happened on November 22nd. I started recapping the events from the daytime until the night, trying my best to robotically hold in my emotions. It didn't work. It was even a surprise to me when I broke down, crying hysterically. When I spoke of that night, I felt as though my body was transported there again, reliving the horror. The one person who would have been able to comfort me at this time was dead. The DA asked the judge to allow me to have a moment off the stand to regroup. He granted the request, and I was escorted out of the court for about 10 to 15 minutes. The DA and psychologist tried to calm me down, but I calmed down on my own and in my own time. They promised that I would only be asked one more question. I agreed to enter the courtroom again. I was not expecting what I was about to witness. Oh, I'm getting chills. The entire room of once annoyed faces was now filled with faces streaming with tears, eyes reddened, and noses were being blown into tissues. I did a double take at everyone as I approached the stand again. I knew that my story was sad, but I didn't know it would evoke so much sadness from strangers. The last question the DA asked me was, "What is today's date?" I answered quickly so that I could hurry up and get out of that chair. I was 1 week away from my 16th birthday. This is a time when an adolescent is beginning her transition into young adulthood. Here, I was wishing for my life to be over. I felt like an 80-year-old who lived a long and hard life. My thoughts and my memories weighed heavily upon me. I felt old and weak and sickly and depressed all the time. This was my transition into a new life, one without parents or anyone who truly loved me or my siblings, one where I was looked upon as unprotected prey to take advantage of, one where, with the exception of my siblings, I existed alone. And yes, it gives me chills to even read that again, because it is so true. These feelings that I felt as a child, yes, it was very difficult. And I still remember going on the stand and talking about what happened that night, and my body just responded and reacted, convulsing tears and crying. And yeah, it is extremely difficult for a human child to have to go through losing one parent by the hands of another and then having to talk about it over and over and over again. But that was necessary so that my father can be brought to trial. And as we continue, we'll get to the trial in the memoir if you'd like to continue with me. And next time we'll read chapter 18, All That Glitters. I want to thank you for sticking with me this long. It's difficult to read, and I'm sure it's difficult to hear.